Learn to improve conversions and generate more leads with the video podcast at marketingoptimization.tv.
Hi, and welcome to the Marketing Optimization Podcast with Alex Stein. I am your host, Alex Harris, and today we're talking with David Shriner Cahn. How you doing, David?
Great. How are you, Alex?
Excellent. David is the host of the business podcast Smashing the Plateau, featuring leaders helping leaders break through their barriers. To get started, what would be your definition of optimization, and why is it beneficial?
The issue about optimization, or as I like to describe it, success, is really up to each individual, and everyone who is in a leadership position, whether it's a business owner, you're head of a department, a marketing department, or whatever, you're going to have your own definition of what success is for you. And your listeners may be familiar with the book by Simon Sinek about understanding why you're doing what you're doing. So, start with why. So really, the core is to understand why it is that you're doing what you're doing. You should be excited about what you're doing. You should want to get up and go to work every day. And if that isn't true, then you have to do some research and figure out what your why is, right? So for everybody, it's different. For me, I personally believe that that every individual has gifts, every team has gifts, and every organization has gifts. And when you share your gifts, the world prospers. Right, so I like to use that as the starting point for me, but as I said, for each person, it's going to be a different definition.
Absolutely. Now, you're the president of 10 strategic partners, and you created the 10 system to reduce stress, decrease costly mistakes, and identify, find, integrate, and manage resource companies to smash the plateaus and really drive success. And now this is a little different kind of show that we normally do. It's definitely not a marketing show, but it's certainly a business show. I know in my career, I started in corporate for many years, and when I became an entrepreneur, or at least full-time, I didn't realize how much I didn't know about business, and I kept on reaching these plateaus. So can you talk to us a little bit about the 10 system and what you kind of go through to kind of identify that?
Sure, and let me actually start with why we created what we created. So I, like you, I also spent a good bit of my career working for others. The earliest part of my career was as an engineer working in corporate. I spent a couple of decades working in small to mid-sized nonprofit organizations as a leader and manager, and then I started 10 Strategic Partners in 2006. And what I discovered when I started my company is that in order to help leaders in business, what they did initially, I was thinking that they needed advice, and I was using a fairly traditional consulting model. And what I realized is that I was having the same conversations with clients over and over and over again, and what they really needed was help with the implementation. Advice is great. The truth is that most people who are in leadership roles or who are entrepreneurs have lots of ideas. They're not short on ideas. And if you think about what you need to go through when you're trying to implement something that has a difficult change aspect to it, you're working with people and trying to convince people that change is important, and you're trying to probably trying to make some changes in behavior, which is not so simple. And when you're planning the change process, as part of your plan, you know what you know and you know what you don't know, and that's what your plan is based on. Then when you start implementing, what happens is things pop up that you didn't know when you created the plan. And how do you deal with them, right? And particularly for leaders, there's a lot of fear involved in starting any kind of change process, whether it's changing the way you're doing a marketing effort, or you're making some minor changes in your product line or your offering, you're making some changes in your pricing, whatever it is, you're not really sure how it's going to turn out. So often there's fear involved. And as you're starting to go through the implementation, if something pops up that's unexpected and it kind of knocks you for a loop, then that will often build frustration and accelerate the fear, and it sort of loops back. So what you need to do is have a way to implement something that has some consistency to it, has some structure, and has some support. And what I've found is that there are tactics that you can use that will help the implementation actually happen. And a lot of it involves structure and support. And if you want, I can go through like the basic components and what will really help. So these are like, tips for your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to go through this. So what I heard is like you need to really self-assess initially, understand the basics, before we start and move into specific tactics, really self-assess what your strengths are and maybe what your weaknesses are, and maybe not go towards your weaknesses, but understand what could propel you to that next step, and then understand maybe the fear and then kind of face that fear and kind of push towards it. Is that kind of a way to explain it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And when you're looking at your strengths and your weaknesses, what can you do that will capitalize on your strengths? And if your weaknesses are an impediment to again, going back to how you define success, if your weaknesses are an impediment to your ability to be successful, then you need to find some way to address them. Mm-hmm. It could also be that what you think are weaknesses really don't have a huge impact on success. And then I would say, try to ignore them.
Okay, cool.
Right? So like, if you think about, as an example, traditional job performance review, very often what happens is the supervisor spends maybe 10% of the time talking about your successes and 90% talking about what the supervisor assesses as your failures.
Right.
Right. And in actuality, we all have things that we're good at and that we're not so good at. And the company is probably better off focusing on what you're good at and finding some other way to get what you're not so good at done, probably by somebody else.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I remember being in corporate, we would have a lot of successes. I was there for a decade, but it tended that the CEO or the upper management always remembered the negative things. Just a couple of those things, and it kind of created a little bad environment for us, for sure.
Right. Like there's this 80-20 rule in life and in business, right? 80% of your success often will come from 20% of your activity.
Right.
And if you think about that in the job performance context, what is the 20% of activity that an employee needs to perform to create this 80% success for a company?
Absolutely.
And 80% actually is really good. You can do a lot with 80%.
Absolutely.
Right. So ignore the other 20%.
Love it. Now let's get into some specific tactics.
Okay, yeah, so the specific tactics. So the first thing you need to do is when you're looking at where the opportunities are to grow your business, assuming that you have, you've already established what the product market fit is, and you see where the opportunities are, and you see what needs to change if you're looking at your strengths and weaknesses, what needs to change in order to do a better job at creating success. Try to identify one thing at a time that you want to change. The companies go through these, they'll have this annual plan where they're going to have 63 change initiatives. Well, a company can't handle 63 change initiatives. You're lucky if you can handle one at a time, right? So I would say, and they're hard to do. So pick one and work on that one. And they're basically, once you start working on it, there are 4 steps that you need to work on. First is you need to know what it is you're trying to do. What are the activities and the actions you're going to take that you're implementing to see some change. Understand, based on your definition of success, what it is you need to measure to see how successful you are. And success is not an absolute, it's a scale, right? So what can you measure to see how you can be more successful or less successful? As you implement this, whatever the action is, have a set time that you will meet. First of all, that you'll look at the metrics, that you will meet with your decision-making team, whoever is involved in that project that has a decision-making role. Have a set time, like once a week, once every 2 weeks. It should be fairly frequent. I would say once a month is generally not enough, because it's not going to keep driving progress. Mm-hmm. So have a set time to meet. It doesn't have to be a long meeting. Look at the results. identify what you can learn from those results so that you can improve for the next step. Because business is an iterative process. So it's implement, measure, learn, improve. Right? And the core is you've got to have that decision-making meeting because it forces everybody to be accountable. And in between the meetings, you need to have some very clear but short list of action items that everybody who's a part of the project is responsible for doing.
Makes sense.
Right? So every time you meet, you review what were the action items that you determined at the last meeting everybody was going to do. What are the results? What worked? What didn't work? What do we need to improve for the next step? What are everybody's marching orders for the next week or the next 2 weeks? And just keep at it. Because if you have that structure, it will help move things forward. And there's another key component that's really important, which is you need to have someone who's identified as the leader to drive the change process. And in particular, you're better off if the person who's driving the change process is not part of the day-to-day running of the day-to-day activities of the project, because the person who is driving it will have a little more independence and will be able to see things that the people who are in the trenches don't see. And you've got to give that person freedom to call things like he or she sees them.
It's interesting how your process is very parallel to a marketing optimization process, where we go through an iteration process and measure, analyze, review. So while you're not only optimizing your marketing, you should be creating a system for yourself to continue to iterate and improve upon your own process, your own system, your own fears, and kind of get through those discoveries to really smash those plateaus, because we as we make these changes in our marketing campaigns or in our businesses, we just get to a certain level that we can't see how to kind of get to that next step.
Right. Yeah, like A/B testing.
Exactly.
Same idea. And the other thing, people think that, oh, well, if we're going to smash the plateau, if they look at examples of other businesses that have been wildly successful, it seems like the success has happened in quantum leaps. Well, in actual fact, it generally doesn't happen in quantum leaps. It happens in small iterative steps.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at like Thomas Edison with the light bulb, he wasn't the first one to create a light bulb, and it wasn't like, and one day he went out and created this light bulb, and suddenly everybody had electricity. Right. It was a lot of testing, a lot of small steps, and if you look at any breakthrough in business or in life, generally it's somebody making some small pivot based on other work that person's already done, or often based on work that other people have done.
Yeah, and in the case of Thomas Edison, I actually recently watched a little documentary on that. He grew up kind of failing at a lot of stuff, and he went through all of these iterations of his life, and he kind of got used to knowing that failure was kind of part of it. He was going to experiment and forever, and then all of a sudden, one day it clicked, and kind of like the light bulb went off, and he kind of reached that success at that point.
Yeah. Can I talk a little bit about the thing about failure?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So as we all know, failure is a part of business. What I would say about failure is a couple things. One is expect it to happen, be prepared for it, have a plan to recover from failure when it happens, because in all likelihood it will. And also with your employees, expect that your employees will also fail. And the thing to look at when an employee fails at something is, does that employee learn from the experience and not repeat it? Or does that employee continually repeat the same kinds of failures? Right? So if the employee repeats the same kinds of failures, that's an indication that there's a problem in the fit between the employee and what you're trying to accomplish. If the employee learns from the failure, remember, employees will fail just like you will, and realize that is a learning experience.
And so now, like a lot of people are, have been on the show, they're listening for a while, and they've seen some success, and now you kind of break through that level of success, and you kind of reach a point and you kind of see it and you maybe kind of stress out. And when I've kind of done my own business process, personal development, I realized that once you kind of break through that ability to stress out, you reach kind of a level of mastery to understand that, other people have been down the path before, so you use that to guide you on a way that you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to understand that and be in the dark. And teaching mastery is really, for me, it was about improving my communication. How can I present to an audience? How can I deliver a pitch? And for me, that was one of my main, I would say, weaknesses that I had to really improve on to kind of get to the next level in my career.
Right. So for every time that you have mastered something and you've gone on to a new level, there will be new things that you need to learn and or master in order to keep growing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Because there are, it's your own personal development, and also things around you change, things in the environment change, and you need to be able to address them when they happen.
Okay, good. Any other things that you wanted to cover before we start to close out?
I think we're good.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little about your business and how can we find out more about you?
Sure. So my business is 10 Strategic Partners. There are a few ways to learn about what we do. We work with entrepreneurs and people in leadership roles to help them smash the plateau, primarily using the system that I've described, which involves structure, accountability, support, and resources, especially around team building. So the two areas where we focus a lot of our work are team building, making sure you have the best team possible to do the job that you need to have done, and also around communication. Because one of the things that I find is, especially in today's world, we have all these gadgets to help us communicate. It actually makes the communication much more complicated, because with lots of these devices, the nuances of communication are not transmitted. And so when you're working with a team, the members of the team don't necessarily know what the expectations are for them to perform their work. So you really need to be clear in your communication with them. That's the crux of the work that we do. And we have various programs that we do either individually with clients or in group settings. We do have a new online program that is going to be coming up soon. So anyone who's interested can go to our website, sign up for our email list, and they'll be informed about it. We also have resources on our site. So as an example, we have a free ebook, 5 Setbacks Experienced by Superstar Entrepreneurs. As you mentioned earlier, I host the podcast Smashing the Plateau, where I interview entrepreneurs and thought leaders about this concept of how do you address the critical shift points that you need to navigate to succeed and get through the plateaus in business. And the ebook is examples from 5 of the people who've been guests on my show. So it's a great read. You can go and download it on our site. And that's and I encourage people to listen to the show, Smashing the Plateau.
And his website is 10strategicpartners.com. So definitely go ahead and check that out. Grab his ebook. He's got a lot of great podcasts, a lot of great information on that website there.
Right. The podcast is available on our website, also on iTunes and on Stitcher.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
Just search for Smashing the Plateau and you'll find it.
To close out, what would be the next step that you would give to entrepreneurs to really smash through those plateaus and get to that next level?
I would say 2 things, actually. I would say try to identify one action to work on, and the second is find somebody who will hold you accountable to make sure that you do what you say you're going to do, and have a regular either a meeting, a phone call, something regular with whoever is holding you accountable, whether it's somebody you pay for or a buddy where you're holding each other accountable. The accountability is really important.
Great. Thanks a lot for your time, David.
Okay. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for watching the Marketing Optimization Podcast with Alex Designs. Please remember to subscribe to all of the videos in my YouTube channel. Thank you.